It's time to pick every spread and every total for week 2 of the 2025 NFL season. That's right. We're picking every game, who's going to win, who's going to cover, and then we're picking every over-under. So, if that sounds good, Gronk, spike the like button, and don't be a jabroni. Subscribe to the fresh, new, best betting channel, fantasy football channel on YouTube. It's Money Mitch. Subscribe for weekly picks. Let me know in the comments your opinion, where you agree, where you disagree. I like seeing your comments and I like interacting with you. So, let me know in the comment section below, and let's get started with Thursday Night Football. Every game, spread and total, kicking it off with a great matchup on Thursday night. That's the Washington Commanders at the Green Bay Packers. Total is 48, and the Packers are laying 3.5. It's shading towards 3, so I would recommend, if you can get the Packers at 3, I think this is a bet. At 3.5, there is the back door where the Commanders could potentially squeak in that half a point with a game between two NFC contenders, very much two teams that could be in the NFC playoffs. It could be one of those games where it's a 27-24, right? It could very much be a game that's decided by 3, 24-21 type of game. Very much so. So the half point is a little dicey, but I still lean towards the Packers to win, the Packers to cover, and I would lean towards the under, if anything, and I'll explain why. First of all, I do think that both teams have good offenses, okay? But I am a legit believer in this Packers defense. What I saw against Detroit was a dominant performance from the Packers defensive front. And with Micah Parsons, even with the injury, expected to still play and continue his reps in the rotation. Alongside this defensive front with Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness looked awesome. Devontae Wyatt in week 1. Just the way they were able to terrorize Jared Goff and that offensive line. I do think that the Packers can get some pressure on Jaden Daniels. And the thing that I love about the Packers defense when it comes to this matchup in particular is their speed. Their speed is outstanding. They might have the fastest defense and the fastest set of linebackers in the NFL. Quay Walker, Edgerrin Cooper, they cover sideline to sideline. They break up that yak dimension of any offense. Really, the Lions tried to screen them to death, and it did not work. Jahmyr Gibbs looked ordinary against this defense in terms of his ability to break open yards after catch opportunities. He couldn't do it. He couldn't slip defenders. The Packers were simply all over the football. They rallied to the ball. There's like 3 or 4 Packers on every single Lion out there. So I feel like shorter week, defense, less time to prepare if you're an offense, to dissect these defenses. And there are some injuries on the Packers offense. Reed is still working his way through that foot, right? The offensive line, Zach Tom is questionable, their best offensive lineman, arguably on their team at right tackle. So that could be a pretty big loss. And really, the Packers offense against the Lions, and I would say the Lions have a better defense than the Commanders, but it wasn't super impressive after the scripted drives. Like after the first or second drive, they didn't do too much, and the Packers tend to be very conservative at the end of games running the football. And I do think against the Commanders, they should be able to run the ball, which is another reason to like the Packers here. I do think they can run the ball in the Commanders, who have been one of the weaker run defenses. Like last year they were. This year we don't really have enough information yet because they only played the Giants. But I wouldn't expect too big of an upgrade from their run defense this year overall. So I like the Packers. They're at home. I like the speed of their defense. I like their ability to disrupt Jaden Daniels, not allow him to scramble around because of that fierce pass rush. And I do think they keep everything in front of them, similarly to the Eagles last year and how they played the Commanders: rally, tackle, get quick to the football. That's really what the Eagles did exceptionally well against the Commanders, and they tightened all those spaces due to their speed. And then, again, on the other side, I think the Packers get a bit of a lead through Matt LaFleur's exquisite play calling. They run the football. They seal the game that way. I wouldn't expect a super explosive performance out of Green Bay on offense, especially if Zach Tom is out. So I would lean under, but I do like the Packers to win this game by 3 or more, and I will take them minus 3.5. Okay, the next game is the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. Spread is currently 6.5. It could get to 7 or back to 7. The total is 46.5. I would lean over in pretty much any Bills game right now. So I'm going to go over here. And this is really difficult. Like, the spread is one that I would stay away from because I can see both scenarios in my head, right? Like, I can see Josh Allen terrorizing the Jets defense that struggled against Aaron Rodgers. I could see a world where the Jets run the ball really well. I can see a world where they're able to keep up with the Bills and go score for score, where Justin Fields plays like he did last week. He's mistake-free. He hits some big explosives down the field off play action, hits those crossers downfield. And then I could see a world where the Jets get behind. Justin Fields is forced to throw the ball. Maybe he takes too many sacks, and they're somewhat exposed. I think the Jets did sort of play in perfect game script last week, where they were able to gain the lead. They were able to run the ball. They were able to keep the Pittsburgh Steelers pass rush at bay, and they were able to keep them off balance. I will say I was really impressed by the Jets' play calling, and the Jets do feel like a team more than most that could replicate a Walmart version of the Ravens. I think that's why a lot of people will like the Jets this week, is because they have the running quarterback, they have the big play dimension through the air, right? With Garrett Wilson being Zay Flowers, and a pretty underrated offensive line based on their week 1 performance. Breece Hall looked explosive. They have Braylon Allen for the power to replicate Derrick Henry as well. So I feel like the Jets could definitely have a game plan here that works, but at the same time, like, the Bills defense really only really badly struggles against the Chiefs and the Ravens. Otherwise, it feels like they play way better against other opponents. And I could see, like, Justin Fields is not Lamar Jackson. So this is what's really tricky to me is, like, does Sean McDermott's scheme just straight up expose Justin Fields for the quarterback that we know he is? Like, I'm not sold on Justin Fields being a different guy after 1 week in a new system, but maybe teams have yet to really catch up to what the Jets are actually doing with him at this point. And what they are doing with him is what he's actually good at. So I will give them credit for that. So it's a really difficult game, but when you look at the Bills offense, you know, this is just a well-oiled machine. It's hard to see them being slowed down. It's hard to see them not winning this game because they just have a lot of weapons. None of them are, like, incredible, but they all give different matchups. I do feel like there was a lot of wide open guys. I saw the Bills attack Aaron Glenn last year in Detroit with a ton of man coverage that Detroit played. Buffalo just absolutely sliced, diced, and absolutely shredded Aaron Glenn's defense in Detroit last year. Josh Allen went nuclear. It's basically the game that won him MVP. Like, that, he went crazy in that game. He could do that again, right? This is a divisional dog at home, right? It's not in Buffalo. It's in New York. I think the game in New York last year was only settled by a field goal, okay? And I'm just continuing to talk myself through this because, honestly, I don't have a pick yet. I'm making this live in this video. Like, I feel like I could go either way with the spread. I'm leaning over, though, because I need to see the Bills' defense step up. They do have injuries at safety. They do have injuries at corner. And I need to see them stop the run against a good running football team. And I think the Jets proved in week 1 against the Steelers that they can run the football. Okay, so I'm going to lean over, and I like the over here. But the 6.5 is tricky because it's Josh Allen under a touchdown. Like, he could easily blow out teams. Like, they blow teams out, bad teams. The Bills, that's what they do. And Khalil Shakir could have a good game here. Dalton Kincaid could have a good game here. Coleman might see some of Sauce, right? But they could easily line him up On the other side, they could take advantage of Josh Palmer against Brandon Stevens. Like, there are some mismatches here, and the Bills' offensive line is drastically better than the Steelers, so that's going to provide Josh Allen a lot of time to make magic. So I think the best way to play this game is just play the over, but I am going to take... I'm going to take the Jets with the points. I don't like it. You guys let me know in the comments. I don't like it. It's really hard for me to not take Josh Allen. He's so good. Okay, next, the New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins. Miami is favored by 1.5 at home. This, to me, is just an egregious price. I don't understand this. The total is 43.5. I am a Patriots fan, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think the Patriots were pretty much, consensus better than the Dolphins, like, leading into the year. The Dolphins looked like the worst team in the NFL by a pretty wide margin in week 1. And yes, they're back home. And yes, it's Miami in September in the heat. And New England does have some injuries. We're going to see if New England can get some of these guys healthy, right? I did see Harold Landry and Morgan Moses pop up on the injury report, 2 very important guys against the Dolphins. So, wait closer to Sunday. The spread isn't going to go too crazy here. So I'd wait for the injuries to reflect the health of the Patriots. Christian Gonzalez also being one that could be highly impactful. If there's no Christian Gonzalez, that could make way for Tyreek Hill to potentially pop some things open for the Dolphins. Jalen Waddle, though, is beat up. If the Patriots do have Gonzalez and Davis, I feel like that's going to be really difficult for the Dolphins to move the ball. The reason I like the Patriots in this game is because I like their pass rush against Miami's offensive line. Miami has a couple injuries already on the offensive line, specifically the right side of their offensive line. I think James Daniels already went on IR. They do have one of the weakest tackle positions in football. Also, on top of that, Harold Landry went crazy. He went nuclear in week 1. I think he had 2.5 sacks. Milton Williams is, I think, first in the NFL in interior defensive line pressures after week 1. So the Patriots looked really good up front against Geno Smith. They have a better offensive line with the Raiders than they do with Miami. Tua looked scattershot. He looked all over the place. He looked absolutely horrific against the Colts whenever they would send pressure and whenever they would take his first read away. We saw Mike Vrabel go to Miami a couple years ago against Mike McDaniel's offense and against Mike McDaniel's team and upset them with Will Levis at quarterback on Monday Night Football in Miami, which is a very hostile, tough place and tough challenge to win. And Vrabel did it as a dog. He's a dog here with a team that actually believes in themselves, unlike the Dolphins, a culture that I feel like is trying to set a tone and find an identity. And I do look at the other side of the ball, and I think this makes way for Drake May to have a breakout game because the secondary of the Dolphins is really bad. Kayshon Boutte showed some promise last week against the Raiders. I think he could have another good game. Hunter Henry, Stephon Diggs could get going here. And I think that Josh McDaniels is going to try to infuse a bit more of the running game into the Patriots offense this week. So Travion could have a pretty good game here. I like the Patriots. I feel like they're the better team. They're getting points even if they're on the road. And the Dolphins are a disaster. Like, their culture's a disaster. Their locker room's a disaster. Tyreek Hill off the field is a disaster. And most importantly, I feel like the Patriots' defensive front is going to make the Dolphins' offensive line look like a disaster. So that's why I would take the Patriots here with the 1.5, but I just take the money line to win the game. The total, 43.5. I would lean under on 43.5, but I don't have a strong feeling about either side, I would say, because the Dolphins secondary is so atrocious, and it depends on New England's injuries to really reflect what the total should be. So I'd probably stay away from that for now, but I'll take the under on the pick, okay? Next, we've got 45, the total in Cleveland, Baltimore, the spread being 11.5. I'm going to take Baltimore to win, but will they cover is the question. 11.5 is a lot of points. And Cleveland did play Baltimore pretty damn well last year. I think they actually beat them outright with Jameis Winston last season. And I think in the other game they lost. But Cleveland looked good last week. Their defensive line looked really competent. Denzel Ward is a dog. They could match him up with Zay Flowers. Schlesinger, their rookie linebacker, looked fast. They were able to contain a really good Bengals offense. And I understand the Browns do play a lot better against the Bengals for some reason. And the way that Cleveland does play defense is not a great idea against Lamar Jackson a lot of the times with the heavy man coverage. But at the same time, I don't think Cleveland's just going to get ran all over like the Bills did. I feel like they have a decent enough secondary to kind of contain the options that the Ravens do have. And I guess it kind of comes down to how much can Joe Flacco move the ball against this Ravens defense? What is this Ravens defense? Are they a good unit that just had a bad game against the best quarterback in football on the road? Or are they a unit that maybe is overrated? Can the Ravens get some pressure on Joe Flacco, right? Because Flacco is a sitting duck back there. I don't feel like the Browns are going to be able to run the ball. They really didn't run the ball against the Bengals. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball against the Ravens. It's a really difficult team to run the ball against. And could Fannin and Njoku, those tight ends, work in the pass game, right? Get the ball out of the backfield to Sampson, Judy, Tillman. They've got some options, but Flacco's kind of good for a couple turnovers every game. I'm not a huge fan of the Browns in pass protection. And I just think the Ravens are too much. And the thing that I really think the Ravens are too much is they're coming off a loss. They're coming off a really disastrous loss where they were sort of embarrassed, where they gave up a lead. So I think the Ravens are going to make a point here. And I think they're going to go out and win by double digits. So I'll take the Ravens to win. I'll take the Ravens to cover. I think they win by 13, 14 points. So I'll take the Ravens. I don't love laying this number, though. I would not bet this. Total-wise, 45. I think the reason I like the Ravens, I partly like the under because I don't think the Browns are going to be able to score in this game. They could barely score against the Bengals, right? And it's not like the Bengals defense is that good. So I'll take the under 45, counting on the Browns defense to make this somewhat competitive early on. Okay, sounds good to me. Next, the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. 45.5 is the total, Dallas -6. On the early best bets, I said the Giants look like they're getting too many points. I have not settled on this game as a best bet. I've eliminated it from the card. I just can't get any confidence behind Russell Wilson and the Giants' offense. And I was impressed by the Dallas defense last week, especially their run defense. So I feel like the Giants won't really be able to rely on the running game. I will say that the Cowboys and the Giants, this game feels like a little bit of an under 44.5. The Giants have a much better pass rush than the Eagles. I know that sounds crazy, but the Eagles didn't have Jalen Carter. They lost Josh Sweat. They lost Milton Williams this offseason. Their pass rush is pretty pedestrian overall, especially without Jalen Carter. Okay, so the Giants have Abdul Carter. They have Brian Burns. They have Dexter Lawrence. And this is going to be a much greater test for the Cowboys' offensive line, young offensive line. The Cowboys also don't have a fantastic running game, although the Giants are not a great run defense. And CeeDee Lamb's probably going to get his. George Pickens might get his. But I feel like I'm struggling to see how the Giants score a lot of points on anybody. I'm struggling to see really the Cowboys needing to push the pace to win this game. I don't think they need to go out there and rip the football all over the yard 40 times. I think they're going to play it balanced, conservative, right? Control the game, control the clock. I think that will be more of the emphasis rather than trying to push the pace and push the tempo and throw the ball. So I would go under 44.5, and I think that's my favorite play in this game. I'm also going to lean Dallas -6 now. And I think it's just a fade on Russell Wilson and a fade on this offensive line. Until I see improvement and belief in that area, I'm not going to be willing to bet on the Giants. So Yeah, not a bet for me at Dallas -6. I think it is a lot of points for them, but I still feel like that's probably the right side because Dallas probably ends up winning by 7. So I'll take Dallas in this game, and I'll take the under. Next, the Rams at the Titans. Rams -5.5 at the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is an awkward place to play sometimes. It's kind of an underrated home field advantage. This is Cam Ward's debut in front of his home crowd. And Tennessee looked pretty competitive on defense last week. They totally got after Bo Nix. They made him confused, and they made him unsettled. And Bo Nix looked like bad. He looked outright like a rookie, like he regressed. Matthew Stafford, on the other hand, was literally PFF's #1 graded quarterback. Okay? Matthew Stafford looked fantastic, even in a game where they only scored 14 points against the Houston Texans. Now, I will say, there's a couple different points here. That game was at home. The Rams typically, offensively, are better at home. They're not as good outdoors, right? Second, I would say that the Texans' defense is a lot better than the Titans, even if the Titans did look pretty damn good. Jeff Simmons was awesome in that game against the Broncos. My goodness, he destroyed the game. The Titans secondary, I thought, played really well. Like, McCreary had a pick. L'Jarius Sneed showed up in a big way when he was out there. And then Brownlee also played really competitively. So I think the Titans' corners are a bit underrated. And I think they can give a feisty time to the Rams. I actually think the Titans might cover this game. Like, this is kind of crazy, but Tennessee is at home. Tennessee's really good against the run. They're very hard to run against up the middle because they've got just absolute beef. And I will say Cam Ward looked really good. Now, where I'm struggling here is I'm struggling with the Rams pass rush against the Titans offensive line. The Titans offensive line looks really bad. Where I'm also struggling is the coaching mismatch. Like Callahan versus McVay. Stafford is drastically better than Bo Nix. So could Stafford pick parts and pick apart the Titans in a way that Bo Nix couldn't? So there's areas that I'm not a fan of. So I'm kind of undecided with this game. I'm kind of just staying away from this game. 42, I'll lean the under because I do believe in the Titans defense and I do like the Rams pass rush. And I think the Rams secondary is getting a lot better. So I would go under 42. This game could be a lot like the Broncos game, where the Rams might get outplayed to a certain degree. It doesn't look like they're going to win by margin, and then they end up, the Broncos didn't cover, but they ended up winning, I think, by 8. The Rams could win by like a touchdown or something, like 24-17, or 20-14 or something like that, and just cover. So this is really tricky. The Rams haven't really been a team that wins by margin, though. So I am going to bank on a couple things. So I'm going to bank on the Rams pass rush. I'm going to bank on Matthew Stafford playing like Matthew Stafford and being better than Bo Nix. And I'm going to bank on Sean McVay against Callahan. So I'm going to take the Rams at 5.5. At 6, it's starting to get dicey. But at 5.5, I'm going to take the Rams, and I'm also going to take the under 42. That's my final decision. Next, the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions. Detroit is favored by 6. This is a decisive pick for me, and this likely will show up in my best bets. 47.5 is the total. I'm taking the under because I actually think both defenses are better than both offenses in this game, first of all. Second, I think that the Bears are a good bet. I like Ben Johnson in this game, entering Detroit with his team motivated and fired up to play for their coach against his former team. And I think the Bears have played the Lions fairly well in recent outings. Like, over the last couple of years, the Bears have played the Lions very competitively. They did even cover last year and almost beat the Lions on Thanksgiving in Detroit last season. So I think the Bears can cover 6. 6 feels like too many points. The Lions offensively looked really bad on the offensive line. And Chicago is going to be getting healthier on defense. Jalen Johnson didn't play on Monday night. He should be back. TJ Edwards didn't play on Monday night. Those are arguably their 2 best defensive players. They're going to be playing in this game. I just wasn't a fan of what Detroit brought on offense against the Packers. And I do think Dennis Allen, with his pressure packages, with his creativity, can give Jared Goff some issues, right? And I do think that if Kyler Gordon is out there as well for Chicago, like Chicago has a really good secondary that is a lot better than Green Bay's. Like they don't have the pass rush Green Bay has, but they've got good linebackers, athletic linebackers, and they've got good corners and a good secondary. So I feel like Chicago can match up with Detroit. I think their defense is going to look drastically better than they did last week down the stretch because they'll be healthier. And I feel like Caleb has had some success against Detroit because Detroit plays a lot of man. Caleb's going to be able to be athletic. Caleb's going to be able to scramble around, buy time. The Lions don't have the front that the Vikings have. The Vikings can put a lot more pressure in creative ways and forms in ways that I feel like the Lions can't. The Lions are relying on Aiden Hutchinson, and that's about it. So I feel like Caleb will be clean. I think he'll have time. I think if he has time, these receivers will get open against man coverage. And I do ultimately believe that Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen could arguably be a better coaching staff than Dan Campbell and his troops on the other side, where they might have schematical advantages, especially knowing the Lions as well as they do, as knowing Jared Goff as well as they do. So I actually think the Bears might win this game. So I'm going to take Chicago +6 to go into Detroit and make this game really competitive. I don't think Detroit looked as bad as people thought last week, but I also am still buying into the fact that they looked extremely vanilla and lacking a lot of creation and lacking a lot of flavor. And I'm buying in Chicago featuring more flavor in their game plan than Detroit. Next, Jacksonville at Cincinnati. By the way, I'm going under on that game in case you guys need a reiteration on the Detroit-Chicago, but Jacksonville and Cincinnati, 48.5 is a pretty high number. Cincinnati -3.5. I like Cincinnati at 3. 3.5 gets a little dicey. Again, another game that could be decided by a field goal. What's bothering me here is I felt like Jacksonville had a genuinely overrated performance against Carolina after rewatching the game. Now on the other side, I felt like Cincinnati did not play well, and they typically do not play well early in the season. But I have to wonder how much of that was the matchup with Cleveland and how much of that is them struggling out of the gates every single year. So I have my questions, which is going to keep me off of the game from a betting perspective. It's hard for me not to bet Cincinnati -3 at home, though, against a team that I'm still not sure about in Jacksonville. What I like about this matchup for Cincinnati is Jacksonville offensively last week didn't do a ton through the passing game against Carolina. Almost all of their production was set up through their running game. And Cincinnati's run defense, I legitimately believe, is good. Shamar Stewart gives them a powerful edge rusher who was top 10 graded by PFF last week as a rookie. Trey Hendrickson, also a dog. And then TJ Slayton and BJ Hill give them some big beef in the middle that's hard to run against. And if Jacksonville's limited on the ground, I do believe that that's going to hurt the Jacksonville offense overall. But that being said, Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas should have pretty good advantages on the outside. Trevor Lawrence, if there is a defense to throw the ball against, it should be Cincinnati. On the other side, I'm not quite buying the Jags' performance on defense, even if I like Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen and Aluakon played out of his mind and Tyson Campbell solid. I feel like the Bengals will be able to throw the ball against Jacksonville. Jacksonville's not creating the pressure that Myles Garrett and the Browns are, specifically in Cleveland on the road for the Bengals. Bengals are at home, right? They've got that extra, just no crowd noise. That's where Burrow's going to be able to read the defense, see the field, get the ball out. And I feel like T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, his weapons are going to have decisive advantages on the outside. Chase Brown should be able to squeak out some yards on the ground too. I'm going to go Bengals to win. I'll lean Bengals to cover, something like 30-24. And I'm also going to go over. I think it will be a little bit higher scoring because I'm going to trust Liam Cohen and I'm going to trust Joe Burrow to get us an over here. Okay, so I'll take Cincinnati plus the over. Next, we're going to go under 40, which is one of my favorite totals of the week for Seattle, Pittsburgh. And we're going to go Seattle +3. Okay, I brought this up in my early best bets. I'm standing by it. I think Seattle is the better team. And when you get value on the better team, even if it's on the road, I'm going to take the Seahawks. I'm not quite buying that Seattle is as bad as people think after their loss against the Niners, because I think the Niners, when they're healthy, at least competently healthy, And now they're just completely wrecked again. When the Niners are healthy, they're a very good football team. I think they're top 10 in the NFL. So Seattle, like Pittsburgh, is like a borderline playoff team. And I think Seattle's defense is a really tough matchup for Pittsburgh. First of all, I think their front seven is going to be really difficult for Pittsburgh to run against. It was hard for McCaffrey out there. I also think that Seattle's defense actually had the highest pressure rate in the NFL in week 1, and they still lost. But I think if that's the case, Rodgers isn't hopping around or moving around like Purdy. So I think Rodgers is going to take a lot of pressures, a lot of sacks, a lot of batted passes. I think life is going to be really difficult on Rodgers in this game. And I do think that Mike Macdonald is an excellent defensive mind. Mike Tomlin as a favorite is generally not a very good bet. And on the other side, I do question Pittsburgh's run defense after their performance against the Jets. I think that the Steelers will have the advantage when they're rushing the quarterback and getting after Sam Darnold, which is why I like the under. But at the same time, I do think Seattle could run the ball enough to give them the advantage and win this game, to be able to just be the better running team in this game, which ultimately gets them the win or gets them a close cover. This is very much a game that I expect to be very low scoring. In that case, the game could be decided by 1 or 2 points. If this game was 16-14 or 17-16 or, something like that, I wouldn't be shocked. 14-13 even. It wouldn't be shocking if this game was decided by a point or 2. So I like getting a full field goal here with the Seahawks, and I'm going to take under 40 in the game. Both defensive teams, I think Pittsburgh's defense will be fired up, and I do believe Seattle's defense is for real and will give Rodgers nightmares. Next, the Eagles. -1 at Kansas City. We've talked about it. I like the Eagles. 46.5 is the total. My brain says under. Something inside me is saying under 46.5. I feel like Dallas Goedert could be out for the Eagles. That could hurt. I'm not quite sure what's going on with Landon Dickerson, and I wasn't really inspired by the Eagles' offensive approach last week. I wasn't inspired by their running game. I do think they're going to make enough plays down the field from A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith to make this thing happen and for them to win the game. But I kind of think the under is going to come to play here. I do think that if the Eagles are deficient at tight end and on the offensive line, that's definitely going to hurt them. But at the same time, the Chiefs don't have any weapons on the other side. This is probably going to be a classic, nasty, just play in the mud game that the Chiefs had last year, where they're not able to move the ball. They can't run the ball. They have no weapons to go to. Mahomes is trying to scramble and create and make plays. And while the Eagles defense didn't look great against the Dallas Cowboys, Dallas arguably has the better O-line. They arguably have, they don't arguably, they definitely have the better receivers and the better weapons. And Dak played outstanding in that game. So yeah, the game's in Kansas City. 46.5, it feels like it's going to go under. Not by a lot, but I would say lower 20s or a 24-17 type victory for the Eagles or something like that. Wouldn't be too shocking. Even 27-17. That wouldn't be too shocking to me. The Eagles can just suffocate you. They're very good in the middle of the field with their linebackers, and Jalen Carter is playing this game, which I think will make the Eagles defense look a lot better than they did last week because he's their best player. And I do think the Chiefs defense is going to play a little angry and a little pissed off. I do think so. I just wonder if they have totally regressed and gotten old before our eyes, which is a huge question. But my favorite play here is the Eagles. I think they'll win this game. I think they're more talented. I think that their defense is going to give Mahomes a really difficult time without any weapons. And I think ultimately the Eagles just have more explosives, more weapons. Hurts is going to be able to play well. He has played well against Spags in the past. So I will take the Eagles here. Next, 49ers and Saints. Who knows now? Mac Jones looks like he's going to be starting for the 49ers. I'm going to keep this one short and simple. I'll take the under 40.5. I'll take the Niners. -3. Even with Mac Jones. Jawan Jennings could play, could maybe not play. Kittle is definitely out. I expect the other Niners to suit up. Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Nick Bosa. I expect those guys to play. So with that being said, I think Mac can run this offense. Kyle has been dreaming of having Mac run this offense since the 2021 NFL draft. I think Ricky Pearsall has a good game. Christian McCaffrey has a good game. And I think Kyle finds ways to scheme up some of his other targets in the offense, like maybe the new addition and the return of Kendrick Bourne, who has a great rapport with Mac Jones from New England, by the way. So looking forward to seeing that as the former Patriot duo there. But on defense, I was very impressed with the 49ers last week. Their defensive line is very underrated. They have a lot of rookies that are very talented, and their linebackers are awesome. I think they're going to give Spencer Rattler a tough time. Robert Saleh is going to give him a tough time. And yeah, I feel like Robert Saleh is going to give Spencer Rattler just a lot of pressure. And I think that the Niners will probably win this game through their defense, through their running game. And I think Mac will just have to do enough. So I'll take the 49ers -3. I'll take the under 40.5. Honestly, the under isn't a bad look whatsoever. If the Saints defense shows up the way that they played against the Cardinals, where they did have a few different sacks, they did have, they didn't play too bad. They did keep James Conner to a pretty modest game. If the Saints defense plays that way, like they did against the Cardinals, that they do against the Niners, this very well could be an under, but I'm still going to pick the Niners to win and cover. Next, we have the Carolina Panthers at the Arizona Cardinals. 43.5 is the total, 6.5 is the spread. It felt like a lot entering the week, and I even brought that up in my early best bets. Like, is Carolina getting a bit disrespected here? I went back, I watched that Carolina-Jacksonville game. I will say I thought their offense played better than the score indicated. They were able to run the ball against Jacksonville fairly efficiently. Teteroa McMillan looked real. Bryce Young made some big mistakes. He threw the ball away in the red zone on 4th down. He fumbled the ball in Jacksonville territory. He threw a bad pick. Bryce Young had some bad moments. On the other side, their run defense is atrocious. Like, they are a very, very bad defense. Very bad, okay? So I think my favorite play here is the over 43.5, because I think Arizona's offense will play better than they did last week, because they're playing genuinely the worst run defense in football. And I think that James Conner, Trey Benson, Kyler Murray will be able to hit explosives running the ball. Even if J.C. Horn is good, I still feel like Marvin Harrison will make a couple plays, and I think the guy that will really feast is Trey McBride in this game. And I think Kyler can probably make some big scramble plays because Carolina has no pass rush, like zero. They had the lowest pressure rate in the NFL last week against a bad offensive line in Jacksonville. So, and again, they're on the road. They're not in Carolina. Last year, I think the game was in the 30s. So I think this total is very low for some weird reason. The Cardinals defense has gotten a lot better, but I think that the Carolina offense played better last week than people give them credit for. I think that they just turned the ball over, and I think they made some bad mistakes. But I feel like I have still confidence in Bryce, and I have confidence in Carolina's running game to make some plays here and to keep this one fairly competitive. I'm going to lean Arizona because I do feel like Arizona's defense has a lot more potential to shut down Carolina than Carolina's defense has of shutting down Arizona. So I'm going to say like 7 to a 10-point win feels fair. So I'm going to go with the Cardinals just because I'm so disgusted by Carolina's defense. But at the same time, I think the over is the play. I think Bryce Young is going to make some scrambles. I think Teteroa McMillan is going to make some plays. And Hubbard's going to make some plays. So I think the over 43.5 is a fair shot here. Next, 42.5 is the total in Denver, Indy, -2 Denver. I'm definitely taking the under. I was impressed by both defenses last week. Denver's defense is disgusting. Their pass rush is ridiculous. Nick Bonito might be the best pass rusher in the NFL. I don't think that's even a crazy statement. The guy was in that backfield every play of the game against Tennessee. It was absolutely ludicrous. His get-off is absolutely insane. Guys, his get-off is insane. Now, the Colts offensive line is pretty good, but we know that Daniel Jones isn't exactly the best at creating, at being a guy outside structure. As soon as he gets a little panic, a little pressure, he's going to make mistakes. So I like that for Denver. I also feel like their secondary is drastically better than Miami's. It's not even going to be the same game. On top of that, Denver's good against the run too. Denver's a very complete defense, and they're the only reason they beat Tennessee. On the other side, Bo Nix looked atrocious. And I do feel like Lou Anarumo is going to be able to confuse Bo a little bit once again and do some things that he was able to do to Tua in terms of taking away those RPOs, taking away those quick throws, taking away the first read. So I do feel like this is a good underplay. I will take Denver. I think that they'll be a little angry. Sean Payton specifically will be a little pissed off about how his team performed last week. A lot of people are on Indy here, but I'm not going to go too far away from my priors. I feel like Denver is the better team by still a decent margin. And I think Denver, they may struggle a bit on offense, but I think they'll find a way to win by a field goal. I think they are the better team, and I think that there are still questions about the Colts. Was it really all about Miami? I think maybe it was, So Daniel Jones comes back down to earth a bit. I take Denver to win, and I'll take the under. 44.5 is the total for Atlanta, Minnesota. Minnesota minus 3.5. For some weird reason, I like the over 44.5, even though that wouldn't be my typical play with a Vikings game. And the total, not the total, but the spread 3.5. I'm leaning Minnesota, but I'm very worried about all these injuries. Atlanta has injuries, like Drake London is beat up, but he's expected to play. Darnell Mooney, will he play? Will he not play? Last week, Atlanta's defense played admirably against a beat-up offensive line. Once again, they play a beat-up offensive line, but they are on the road in Minnesota. Minnesota games just typically go over in the dome. Minnesota, it's just a place to score points. I want to say last year there was quite a few points in this game. Kirk Cousins played for the Falcons, but still there was quite a few points. And I do think JJ is going to settle in at home. Atlanta doesn't have quite the defense that Chicago has. Their pass rush is still suspect. You can certainly take advantage of some matchups down the field against the Falcons like Baker did. So I feel like O'Connell's going to be a lot more confident in JJ. I think they're going to let it rip more from the beginning of the game. And Bijan, he's tough. He's tough to stop. Kyle Pitts had a good game. Drake London, I feel like, will dominate this game if he's healthy because the Vikings don't have good cornerbacks. And they do have potential injuries to Darisaw at left tackle. Harrison Smith missed last game. We'll see if he plays this game. Blake Cashman is going to be out, who's a really good linebacker. Andrew Van Ginkel, I think, is in concussion protocol, so we'll have to find that out. But I think we need more information before we get to officially picking this game. But I'm going to go with the over 44.5 is the main pick because of the Vikings' defensive injuries. And then 3.5 is tricky. I'll lean towards the home team with the Vikings. I think they're the better team, and they are at home, and I have a lot of respect for Brian Flores' defense, and I have a lot of respect for this coaching staff compared to Raheem Morris at home in a Sunday night game. So give me the Vikings. And then on Monday night, we have two games. We have the Bucs and the Texans. I like the under 42.5. I like the Texans to cover 2.5. I think their pass rush is going to get after Baker Mayfield. I think they've got the corner matchups to match up with Evans and potentially Abuka as well. Abuka could have a good game in the slot, but I think Evans will be limited. I also was not a huge fan of the Bucs run game against the Falcons. I don't think it will get a lot better against the Texans. The Texans defense is downright disgusting. They are the best defense for my money in football. They held Stafford and the Rams on the road to 14 points. I mean, come on. At home now? Oof, look out. On the other side, I feel like the Bucs defense isn't great, but I think Todd Bowles can find some different blitzes to get to CJ Stroud and confuse this offensive line. I also think that they're really good against the run, so it's going to limit the Texans' balance. And due to the deficiencies of the Texans' offensive line, if you can limit their balance, it's going to allow you to get to Stroud more often. And it just feels like the Texans' offense is still sloppy. They just stall for long portions of time. They might start the game well, but then they'll kind of fade down the stretch when teams figure out what they're doing. So I'm going to go under 42.5 on the power and the back of the Texans defense, but I will take the Texans to win because I think CJ ultimately will come through in the clutch in this game to Nico Collins, and I feel like at home their offense is a bit better with no crowd noise to deal with. And then you've got a 47 total between the Raiders and Chargers, which is pretty high, and the Chargers at 3.5. This game does feel more higher scoring than lower scoring, I will say that. So I'll lean over. I think Geno was impressive against the Patriots despite the rain. I'm expecting Brock Bowers to play, so I will say that. The Raiders' run game hasn't been impressive. Can it get going against the Chargers? I'm not sure. But I do think they've got more weapons than people realize, more speed than people realize with Tucker and with also Thornton, who can both fly down the field. Jacoby Myers can work the underneath. And I think Geno is going to be able to pick apart the Chargers over the middle of the field, throw the ball for over 300 yards, keeping up to what the Chargers will be doing, because I think Herbert will be pushing the ball downfield against a suspect Raiders secondary. And I do think the Chargers offensive line is better than the Patriots. I also feel like Herbert played unbelievable last week. Like, I'm just going to ride that and continue that in a dome on the road. Even on the road, I feel like that Raider stadium is built for points. So I think the Chargers score. I think Geno finds a way to keep up, and I will take the Chargers and the Raiders over. Now, the question is the spread. The one thing that's scaring me, and this is why I'm not going to bet the game, I think that if the Chargers were not traveling from Brazil back home, I would take the Chargers to win and cover, but that's a weird trip. Like, I could easily see this game being decided by a field goal, but I also feel like the Chargers are better than the Raiders. So this is a stay away for me, but with the hook, I'll take the Raiders. Because I could see, the Raiders making this a field goal game, especially if the Chargers come out slow with slow legs, because of the Brazil trip. I just don't know how this really affects them. So I'll take the Raiders with the points. I'll take the over 47. There it is, guys. Every pick for the total, every pick for the spread. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, Gronk, spike the like button, and don't be a jabroni. Subscribe. Stardom, Situm, and more betting and fantasy advice coming on Money Mitch. We'll see you soon. Peace.